Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. We took the day off for President's Day, but we're back and plenty to discuss. For the pre-show, since Russ has stiffed on us, I will handle the pre-show festivities. And today is the 40th. When I read this, I know February 22nd every year. I know what that day is, but 42 years, Kev. I know I'm old. Because
he said that when he's talking to me, yeah.
But it's like it doesn't seem like 42 years since the Miracle on Ice, and maybe it's because it's on YouTube and we see it every year on this day or every 4 years when the U.S. is in the Olympics, but it doesn't seem that long ago.
No, it does not. It was voted the most influential sporting event of the century, so much. They made a movie about it and everything else, and this is my time every year at this time. I make my pitch to have Mike Caruzione's spot on the ice commemorated. Lake Placid Arena is still there; it's still active, and a lot of teams play there. It should be marked right.
Absolutely.
Sorry. He'll kick in a second.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
No commemoration on the ice, and it really should be there. I just don't, see why it's not there.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's unlike most people, and I've said this every year when we've talked about this. I watched it live because CTV, I think it was CTV, carried it live. And on ABC, I don't think it was played until like 7:30.
Yeah,
I think it was a Friday night. I think they carried it live at 7:30, and of course Jim McKay was. It was like he was announcing it. And it was like he had a canary in his mouth. You know what I'm saying? It was like you could see that he couldn't keep in the joy. Although, but then. And then they showed it again the following day, too, because everybody wanted to watch it. But I saw it live, and it was Don Chevrier who did the broadcast on CTV. And it wasn't the same as Al Michaels with Do You Believe in Miracles? Yes, but it was still, and Kev, the thing was, I followed that team a lot. And when they played at Madison Square Garden, I think it was a couple weeks before the Olympics, maybe a week before. It was a warm-up game, and it was sort of a friendly, I guess. And they lost like 8-1. They got their butts kicked. And I remember, I think Jim Gordon, the Rangers announcer, and Ed Chadwick, they did the play-by-play, and it was sort of an embarrassing performance. You could see that this is the team that beat the NHL All-Stars, and the following year would win the Canada Cup, and then against the U.S. in that Olympics, they just they met their match.
Yeah, and I've written so much about that, but the story of that game too was what Herb Brooks said afterward to Jim Craig. He basically said to Jim, "I made a mistake. I thought you were ready, but your fastball seems 5 miles an hour slower than it was. I've worn you out. You're not ready." And he just really laid it on him and really fired up Craig. Craig was ready to go in there and prove to Herb Brooks that he wasn't tired, that he was ready to go.
Yeah.
It was all psychological warfare. Herb Brooks used to tell that, the Russian players, that couple of Russian players, I think it was Maltsev and Harlamov, looked like Laurel and Hardy, he always said, how can you not compete against Laurel and Hardy? And, he always had, something going with that group. So, it's just one of the legendary games. There'll never be anything like it. It was just.
Another thing about that I always think about is Janusek, who's the backup, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't he Herb Brooks's college goalie? Like that was the guy, if I remember right. I thought maybe I'm wrong about that, but
I think he was University of Minnesota. I'm pretty sure.
I thought he was like the guy, and that was what was. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought there was something about that made the Craig thing so much more surprising.
Yeah, the best Januzak story is Dave Ogren, who was the PR guy and then ended up becoming director of of USA Hockey. At that point, was in his early 20s and was the PR guy. Was on a plane, was wearing a USA Hockey jacket, and the pilot made note, because there were players on that thing, that there were so many players and on the plane, and people were asking for autographs, and they'd stick their pads in front of Dave Ogren, and the players just told Dave, say, just sign them. They don't know who the players are. And Dave said, well, probably Januzak is not getting off, so he just signed Steve Januzak's name on lots of autographs. And he always says, there are probably 50 to 100 autographs of Steve Januzak out there that are not authentic, that I actually signed them because I just pretended I was Januzak because nobody knew who he was.
The other crazy thing I had to say about that, though, that is like, it was the thing that for Flyers fans, like people around here, like when I was watching that game, when I was watching the Olympics in general, I remember watching on a black and white TV in my parents' room, and watching them tie up Sweden in that game, in the tie-up game, and that goalie was Pelle Lindbergh. It was playing in Sweden, and that was the first time I had seen Pelle play. And growing up as a Bernie Parent fan, I just loved the fact that this guy had the same mask as Bernie Parent and was going to be a Flyer. I thought that was so Pelle Lindbergh became my favorite player, and still number 31 to this day. My daughter's number 31 when she plays in soccer tournaments, stuff like that. And still like the guy that Pelle was my guy. He was totally 100% my guy. And that's the first time I saw him was in that situation. And also Thomas Eriksson, who also played for the Flyers, played on that team too. He was on that Sweden team too. He was like a little less famous of a Flyer, but
well, I mean,
look, we had Pelle Lindbergh.
I think the other thing is Peter Stastny played for Czechoslovakia, and you see like Glenn Anderson played for Team Canada. I mean, there were a lot of good players on those teams, that people don't really remember, because Canada, unlike other years where they're just the best team in the tournament and the most talented, that they weren't at that level. They actually had some success, but then didn't make the medal round. But it was a great tournament. But it's just so weird that 42 years, and I think when we did it a couple years ago, it's just bizarre.
The one other thing that's not readily known is that Don Waddell, who's the general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes, was forecasted to make that team. He was a great puck moving defenseman at the college level. Only played one NHL game, but most people thought he was going to make that team, and he got hurt. And he was not the last cut or anything. That was Craig Cox. But I had the Russian wrong. It was not. It was
Ralph Cox.
No, it was Oh, you're Ralph Cox. Yeah, not Craig Cox. Ralph Cox, absolutely. Yeah. But I also had the name of the Russian wrong. It was Mikhailov, who Stan Laurel. He looked like Stan Laurel. So.
Oh yeah.
Wasn't Don Waddell in college at that time teammates with one Tom Laidlaw?
They were defensive partners.
Right.
The best story about their friendship is Don Waddell played one game in the NHL, and it was against the New York Rangers. So he shows up on the ice, and Tom Laidlaw skating him to warm up, and he skated by, and he said, and both remember the quote accurately, "What the hell are you doing here?" And also Don Waddell readily admits that in his first shift in the NHL, Ron Greshner danced around him and scored a goal. That was the only goal he gave up during that night, but it was on his first NHL shift.
There you go. Oh man! All right, let's get into the actual introductions here. Do we didn't do yet? I guess. Hello, Hockey World. It is February 22nd, 2022.
I'm Michael Lagello.
I'm Anthony Mingione.
I'm Kevin Allen. I'm thankful I at least remember my name. So,
and I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and the goings in the hockey world. And I wanted to. I'm working on the rumor chart right now, and I'm heavy into it. And it's been. It's going to go up later tonight, I think, tomorrow morning at the latest. A lot of players, so I do want to get into some of that as well. But Mike, what do you have anything interesting to go with in the beginning here, news-wise?
Well, I think the landscape has changed a little bit after what happened last night in Montreal, because I know that you mentioned yesterday about the Leafs being maybe in on Giordano, but
Yep.
Their cap situation at that point did not lend itself to that possibility, but now it may have because Jake Muzzin, who was concussed last month in a game against St. Louis, came back. He missed I think a couple weeks at least, 7 games. I know that. He came back, was sort of slowly getting back into it. Last night, he lost his edge and slammed into, it was not a purposeful hit, but it was a collision between him and Chris Weidman. And when he collided with him, his head went full force into the ice, and he was down on the ice for a few minutes, skated off under his own power, but did not travel with the team to Columbus. And now the reports out there, Nick Kypreos reported, a few other sources are saying he's out indefinitely. And when you have a concussion quickly followed by another concussion, especially the player who is, he's been a physical player, a lot of wear and tear on him. It wouldn't be surprising if he was out a significant period and maybe out until the beginning of the playoffs. It could be a situation where they say better safe than sorry. We'll keep you out until the playoffs. And then LTIR comes into focus here, just like with Kucherov, just like with Mark Stone. That opens up $5.62 million in salary, and that would allow the Leafs to trade for a defenseman. Now, the one thing I can tell you is that, and I was up in Toronto on Saturday, the speculation around there is they're not trading for a rental. If they're trading their first round pick or they're trading prospects, they want a player that they can have for a number of years, not a guy like Nick Foligno last year where they traded a first round pick and then he turns around and signs someplace else and they don't have anything to show for a first round pick. If they're going to trade an asset, they want somebody who's under contract for a year or two, or they think that they can sign to an extension. So I think that's possible, but I mean, they have a month, and I think that's the one thing. They have a month to explore the market, and who knows? Muzzin could be back in 2 weeks, but I think there's a lot of worry there about the future of Jake Muzzin based on what's happened to him.
Well, a name here that came up, and Kevin and I were talking about a little bit earlier today. That is circling around is Hampus Lindholm. Hampus Lindholm, who is he's a UFA. Ducks trying to get him signed. His game has risen a lot this year, and he to the point where the Ducks missed him for a little while. Not too long ago, I guess, due to like a wrist injury. And it was, everybody talked about how noticeable it was that without him in the lineup, they suffer. They definitely suffer defensively. And it's if you lose one defenseman and you're suffering. Kevin, you think they have a chance at re-signing him?
Yeah, I do. I think they have a chance now. That doesn't mean anything. But they think they're going to be able to get him to stay there, and that's important to them because they've got a good young team. So I think he's a priority, and I think they'll open up the vault a little bit. They got a new GM in town, new sheriff, and Pat Verbeek's a lot like Steve Yzerman. He's going to build through the draft, but he appreciates hard-working guys, appreciates guys who are on the upward trend. So I see them making every effort to sign him. That doesn't mean they'll get it done. One thing we've noted through the years is when guys get this close, they start to say, well, I ought to at least explore it.
And that seems to be the narrative with Lindholm, is the fact that he's considered. I mean, I think he's a top maybe 15 defenseman in this league, but is sort of out of sight, out of mind because he plays in Anaheim. Unless you're willing to stay up till 10 o'clock to watch a game for 2.5 hours, you're not going to catch much Hampus Lindholm games unless they're playing East. But he's a really good defenseman. But the thing is that they've got 3 unrestricted free agents. They have Lindholm, they have Josh Manson, and they have Raquel. And they have cap space. But
they have one unrestricted free agent.
Well, you mean
Lindholm's there, right?
Lindholm is the only one that matters, is what you're saying? Yeah. And I agree, but I mean, the thing is, they may think we don't have a chance to sign Lindholm unless we pay him $8 million, but we can sign Manson and we can sign Raquel. So, I mean, that's all depends on how.
Has he risen to that point? Like, have we seen him grow to that? I don't think we have. I mean,
in many ways, in some ways, this kind of reminds you a little bit of Edmonton with Darnell Nurse in a lot of ways. You may not necessarily see him as being, a number one per se, but by potential default in Anaheim.
Yeah, you just opened this talking about how important he is to the Ducks.
He's really important to the team.
Yeah, but salaries now are based on importance to the team. I mean, comparables are still important, but you pay guys based on your situation and how important they are. In fact, with one of the things in Detroit, that's what Yzerman says in all negotiations. I don't want to hear about your stats. What we're going to talk about is your importance to my team.
Yeah,
that's the way he negotiates. I think that's how Verbeek will negotiate as well.
And people in the chat are talking about, Werenski making over 9, Seth Jones making over 9, Dougie Hamilton making over 9. The reason that Leaf fans were doing huzzahs and handsprings when Morgan Rielly signed his contract is he wanted to stay in Toronto. He was prepared to take a little bit less and get the 8 years, and he's at 7.5, and they're ecstatic over that deal. Now, maybe they won't be ecstatic in 7 years, but they're ecstatic right now because the cap hit wasn't that severe. But if you're talking about a top flight, top pairing defenseman, the talk starts probably with a 7 and then raises at least to an 8.
Mike, if you're talking about a guy, if you're going to say he's a top 15 defenseman in the National Hockey League, you accept the fact that is the echelon that you're going to be paying at.
Yeah. I think it's deeper than the top 15. It might be 20, 25.
Yeah, is Lindholm a top 15 defenseman in this league?
Look around the league, and if you have a pulse, you get 2.5 million, and if you're decent, you get 5 million.
Yeah.
Okay, and then after that, you grow.
Yeah,
exponentially. Like your point is well taken about how they would, like to probably sign everybody, but I think the priority is definitely Lindholm, and I think they'd like to sign Manson too, but not as much as they'd like to sign Lindholm. They want to get him.
Manson does want to stay there from talking to people, but whether or not he's going to be able to do that. You mentioned today to me, Kevin, and I've heard this as well before, that this is, and we've talked about it with Mike, this is maybe a Toronto Maple Leafs target, Manson.
Yeah. Now, I thought I read somewhere, I mean, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I thought I read that Manson might have said no go to Toronto.
Elliot Friedman reported a couple weeks ago that Toronto was one of the teams that he believes that most of the Canadian teams are on his no fly
zone. Yeah.
Right. But that it is possible that if they had approached him and he didn't have a contract and Anaheim was not going to make the playoffs, that he would agree to go to a team like Toronto or a team like Calgary that are making the playoffs because it helps them in terms of marketability for free agency. But he wants some control, and that's what he's earned on his contract. So that's fine. But the thing is, Manson's a rental, Lindholm's a rental. Klingberg, Friedman reported that the Leafs were in on Klingberg, and I know Leaf fans are probably shaking their head at that fact because Klingberg is the same type of defenseman that they have throughout their lineup, all offense, little defense. But they were interested in him, but they decided on this deal that they made on Saturday for that didn't cost them much and actually helped them in terms of the cap next year, trading Ritchie to Arizona. And I said it 2 weeks ago. I said Ritchie to Arizona because Arizona's got 5 guys under contract, and they definitely would be interested in, I'm sure in other deals, they're going to be interested in getting bodies who are signed next year, because good luck trying to get free agents to sign there when they're going to be playing in a bandbox at Arizona State.
Yeah, they like the return. That's the big thing. They're going to be 3 or 4 teams that will take salaries if you give them, a potential second round pick.
Yeah. Anthony, I want to talk to you about Ristolainen for a second. Yes. This is another name that I've been talking about out there. Rasmus Ristolainen. He's also been linked to Toronto a couple times by different people. I said to somebody today, and I really do believe this, that what happens with Ristolainen will tell us what's going to happen with Fletcher. I feel as if Ristolainen is re-signed by the Flyers, then we know Fletcher is here for a while. And if he's not, then if he's traded, then Fletcher, I think his job could be in serious.
From what I've been able to glean, that I don't think this off season that Fletcher is necessarily going to be in jeopardy from people I've been able to talk to.
Right.
And I think he would have, in either circumstance, whether they get Ristolainen re-signed or they decide to move him. I think he still has the off season, and he has the early part of and it still has at least the early part of next season before they would decide to make that kind of a move.
Yeah. Now, do you think Ristolainen would be moved?
I think there's a good chance of it. Yes, especially if they think they can get a bit of what they sent out, obviously, to Buffalo. I think if they think they can squeeze a first round pick in return, I think there's a good chance of that. I do.
Yeah.
I think so.
How good is he, Anthony?
Rasmus, there's a lot of things about Rasmus Ristolainen I like. I think he provides the one thing I think that makes the Flyers bite their knuckles, the fact that they are not an overly physical blue line without him in the lineup. That says something. Things happen to him on the ice, overcommitments. He still has those issues. But I think he has value to Philadelphia going forward. But I also believe that he could be a very valuable chip for them. Again, he has every intention of going to market. He's going to go into free agency. So if the Flyers are going to re-sign him, they're going to have to pony up probably to get him all along.
Right, they're going to give a lot to him. I mean, can't really blame him. He's been now he obviously thinks he's going to get into a better situation coming to Philly than Buffalo, and he ends up in the same situation. He has
to think to himself, after you're trading Claude Giroux, which I at this point now we're all pretty much in agreement that that's going to happen. It's what the team you may have to communicate to him what your plans are this offseason if he is going to resign. Are they going to go after a top flight free agent? Are they going to be moving out some younger players too that I think that could potentially be on the move as well if they feel if they're trying to. And it's a mix that obviously does need shaking. They've had injuries, and that's certainly a massive amount of injuries, and that plays a big role in where they're at right now. But I think there's other things too, where I think there are certain players that they would like to have kicked in a little bit more that haven't.
The name that keeps coming up, and I just don't really buy it completely, but is that of Travis Konechny. I don't really buy that he would be moved, but at the same time, like you said, they may have to make a change. They're not getting. And I've noticed. I don't know about you, but I've noticed a little uptick in Konechny's play over the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. He's definitely picked up his game. And when he's playing really well, he's a very, very effective player. But he has the ability to disappear for very long stretches of time.
And he's still. And again, not that you want him to be a good. Obviously, you want him to focus on the offensive game. But also he has there are certain things that defensively that he should have picked up in the last few years that he still is making the same mistakes that he was making 4 years ago. So that's another thing that goes into the mix when you're talking about a Travis Konechny. Why
I think with Konechny, the issue here is the Flyers are in need of a player they know they can trade. They have guys they want to trade, but they don't know whether they can trade him. And with that, you can trade him.
Right.
Because people like him. They feel like there's more there. So I think that's the issue. I don't think they want to trade him, but they may have.
I think that's dead on. And Konechny's that rare player that he is completely and utterly instinctual. And that works to his advantage and disadvantage.
Exactly.
And so you get him to play in a defensive system, not that easy because he's completely he believes in his instincts. He believes his instincts got him there. He's going to stick with his instincts, but at the same time, and so he's going to play where he's going to be where he thinks he should be. He's going to anticipate when he thinks he should anticipate. He's not going to lay back. He's very much, but at times that makes him a really interesting player because he's hard to defend against if he's on top of his game.
And you do want to see him. I think again, I think he and Sean Couturier had in many ways that we look at and wonder how Ivan Provorov would have projected this season. He looked very good, obviously, with a good partner in Ryan Ellis. I do often feel like that we see the best out of Travis Konechny when he's playing with a Sean Couturier. And again, the Flyers are so hit down the middle right now, with injuries and players being out. That I think a lot of times you can allow for Konechny's offensive instincts when you know you've got a player who's good enough two-way to cover for sometimes when he goes on those forays.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
I wanted to make a point. Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, it brings me Kevin to Nemestikov, like another player who is out there, who's like a good top, could be a second line, third line guy, playing really, really well. Has had a career all over the place. What do you think? If you're cheering for him, what do you do?
I think he's going to end up one of the best bargains in the trade market, and I say that because he's so versatile. Like, he has played on every line for the Red Wings. He's been on the fourth line. He's on the third line. He was on the second line. Now he's been playing on the first line. Bertuzzi got moved down, and the reason he can do that is he can do whatever you want. Like, he can kill penalties. They use him on the power play because he likes to go to the net. He's highly skilled. He can skate. He's defensively responsible. And he's one of the more liked guys in the dressing room. Very popular with his teammates. Wow. He is a Russian player who grew up in America. He's more American than you are, Eklund.
Yeah.
He is a very, very, very likable guy. And he scored 13 goals this season. And sometimes he's only played 12 or 13 minutes.
And I'll give you two things that are interesting. And he's a $2 million salary, so I can retain 50%. He's $1 million player, which is only a $250,000 more than a league minimum salary, which very, very fittable for teams that are up against it. Kev, why do I suspect that the team that he played for before that is looking for forward depth might be one of the teams interested? And by the way, another team that was interested in signing him as a free agent, whose father works for the organization, happens to be the Toronto Maple Leafs. So maybe not at the deadline, but maybe not in free agency, they'd be interested in him. But Tampa Bay, him going to Tampa Bay makes just all the sense in the world.
It sure does. And, a lot of people in Detroit didn't understand Steve Yzerman's fascination with him. He drafted him in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Until he's been here and you watched him and you realize that he's not a star, but he really does do everything well.
Yeah.
And the coaches like him because you can plug him in. He'll do whatever you ask. He understands what role he is to play when you move him up and down the lineup. And as I said, he's such a likable guy that, there's no negative side to Nemestikov. Everything about him is plus. He's just not a star. I think originally they had hoped that, maybe he was going to blossom into a 25 goal plus or 30 goals. He's had some decent seasons.
Yeah.
But, he's a valuable, he for a team looking for secondary scores, Pittsburgh wants middle six forwards. Nashville is looking for secondary scoring. Tampa Bay, as Mike mentioned, is looking for that. Also, I think they're looking for a right shot D-man too, but he's got to be better than what they have. The right side's not bad either in Tampa on defense too.
Right.
So, I think there are going to be a lot of teams. I think he's going to be very popular in the marketplace. And, I wrote just recently that I felt, could they squeeze a second out of him? Like, maybe if there were enough suitors in it. I think it's possible, but under normal circumstances, he'd be a third-round pick,
right?
Because mostly he's played on the third line. So
it would make some sense. It would totally make some sense. I also the other name I have right here I wanted to talk about was Holtby, who is I continually say and the big question that we talked about earlier, Kevin, is very true. Is like, where is Dallas? Dallas is still in it right now, and the reality is Dallas is still in it. So as long as they're still in it, Pavelski, Holtby, Klingberg, these guys are, they're all probably not going to be moved anywhere.
Right, and there was a story that came out this morning from David Pagnotta saying that the Stars are trying to talk to Pavelski about signing an extension, which is not surprising since he's been so good the last season and a half. And then, he was great in the bubble in the playoffs. But yeah, they're 3 points out of a wild card spot. They're not out of it. So I would, and maybe that was, the reason that the Leafs didn't kick in on Klingberg is because Klingberg's not available right now. And if Dallas stays in the race, then Jim Nill's probably not selling.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
Yeah, Dallas has, played great at home, and I'm looking, they're 6-4 in their last 10, but they've played reasonably well to kind of hang in there. And, they've got a .571 points percentage. So, it's not like they've got to sell off. They've got a lot going, and they need Pavelski. And, at his age, I don't think, he likes moving around all that much. He may just want to finish it up there in Dallas, unless he feels strongly about trying to, go to a team that has a better shot at winning the cup. But that's hard to do. You don't really know. We can say, well, you can go to Colorado to the best team in the league, but what does that mean? There are probably 8 or 9 teams that can win the cup.
Well, I think so. I think all the playoff teams this year, it tends to be we have such disparity between the playoff and non-playoff teams, especially in the East, that all the playoff teams look dangerous. They all look dangerous. They all look like they're way better than normal. We don't have any of these teams. We don't have anybody with sub 500 that's in the playoffs right now, anywhere.
Yeah, that's well said. They all look dangerous. I agree with you.
They do. They're different situations, and and yet a lot of them have the ability to look terrible. Washington is one of those teams that is definitely that way. They are.
You just hate the Caps, Zach. I
don't hate the Caps. I don't. But listen. I hate the Islanders. You want to talk about a team I hate? You guys always keep giving the Islanders a chance. I hate the Islanders. The Islanders destroyed my childhood. Okay, so the Islanders are something I just don't like anything about the Islanders.
The Islanders destroyed your childhood.
Destroyed my childhood in 1980. That was that streak team was supposed to win the Stanley Cup. They destroyed my so the Islanders now, though, with their losses over this past weekend.
Are you prepared?
Finally, no, I'm not prepared to say anything, but finally don't control their own fate. Before that, they still controlled their own fate. And everybody jokes about this. They're 7 games at hand. So right now they're 21 points back. Okay, so listen.
He wants a mirror.
Remember, they play the Capitals 3 times. Okay, so they play the Capitals 3 times. So there's 6 points there, and they have 7 games in hand. So that's 14 points there. So they still technically they control their fate to within 1 point of the Capitals now. Before that, they controlled their fate to overtake the Capitals. So we can sit there and say they're over, but they still control their fate. So that is something that I think is worth noting.
I want to go back to just for seconds here to talk about the Muzzin Maple Leaf situation, just because it's just such a great illustration of what it's like to play hockey in Toronto or Montreal.
Yeah,
Muzzin goes down. Okay, we know nothing about his diagnosis. We don't know anything about his injury. And already discussing, we're worried about his career. He could be out the rest of the season. Now, he did qualify it at the end there saying, maybe it'll be nothing. They're talking about this opens up cap space. We don't know anything about Muzzin. We don't know. He could be back in the lineup next week.
He's already on LTIR in everyone's head.
Yeah.
But I'll just say this. I wasn't the only one.
No, I realize that. It's the point I'm trying to make. That's what it's like.
Yes.
In the hockey worlds of Montreal and Toronto, where a guy goes down. Dylan Larkin left practice early here in Detroit. If Austin Matthews leaves practice early in Toronto, it is a much, much bigger story. They'd have him on the IR and 2 weeks, and they'd have it all figured out. So it's just a different world. And in fact, but that's kind of what I appreciate about Toronto and Montreal. It's that
I'll always take that over apathy. I'll take it.
Yeah, and our sport, I hate to say it, is ripe with apathy.
It is. There's a lot of people who are just like,
not in Toronto, Montreal.
And
it's big. It's big in those cities.
There was a certain segment of the Montreal fan base that were pissed off that Montreal beat the Leafs 5-2 last night, because Montreal fans are salivating at the possibility of finishing 32nd and having one chance in 4 of getting Shane Wright in the draft at the draft.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's Montreal and Toronto as much as it's becoming older and younger viewpoints. Like my son-in-law, my cousin, who are obviously younger, they look. There's two ways of sort of looking at a team. You want them to either win or you want them to lose badly. Like they have two rooting interests that they can go with either year, depending on what's happening. Once they've established that their Detroit teams are not going to make the playoffs, they're all in on being miserable. They want a bad.
They say that, but then at the same time, when they watch the team, they also, and I see this with Flyer fans, because they, the same thing. No chance. So they want, there's the fan base, local fan base. They're terrible. We need them to bottom out. Stink for Shane. All that stuff, and yet it's like a there's it's almost a nihilistic viewpoint.
Oh, it's wild. But I went through just the lines. I'm old school. I just root for my team regardless. And hey, let the chips fall where they may. But the younger generation, and I think we have to. I know I do as a sports writer. I have to accept that there are now two ways of looking at your team, and I think it's now mainstream. It's not just a few people who think like that. It's a lot of people who think like that.
It is, and
it's right in the middle. There, nobody.
I still don't. I still am above the belief that it is a minority of people who think like that. Because it is a vocal minority of people who think like that. But I think at the end of the day, when you still go to the games, if you still sit in that arena, like a Flyers arena or a Detroit arena, and you still hear people rooting for them to win. You do hear that, even when everything is lost. But there are people out there that are like, oh, they're fine with them leaving.
And I would say, I would also turn around and say that you're talking 19,000.
Yeah.
Now in Philadelphia, it's more like 8,000 to 10,000 based off what we saw Monday.
Right.
Yeah, that may be true of that group, but then you have a whole lot of people, a large number of people who don't go to the games, don't have the necessary.
Yeah.
And season ticket holders, are more committed to the team, and secondly, they skew older. And and those people are going to be just with you thin and thick and thin. So
that's true. I mean, we just see the odds just aren't there for tanking. It just doesn't prove out.
And when people still don't understand tanking, it just bugs me when people start talking that it's just outrageous that players would tank. I say this all the time because people don't seem to get it. I'm sure our viewers understand it. Players have nothing to do with tanking.
Thank you.
Tanking is a managerial decision.
Yeah. Players
it's roster manipulation. It has nothing to do with what happens on the ice.
None of your people seen Major League, for God's sakes.
Well, and players lose out when a team rebuilds because these young players take their jobs.
Exactly.
What league were you in?
So they never think, oh, we're going to get a wonderful draft pick. They don't think like that. Never. Coaches don't think like that.
Because
they think they're going to be gone.
That draft pick might take their job. The players will never tank. It is up to management and that's why, like, for example, back in the day, like I was an advocate of the Leafs, bottoming out and getting, this is to 07, 08, 09, when Stamkos was available. And I was calling the Hockey Buzzcast when it was on a podcast form. And I'm like, okay, they have to trade Sundin. They have to trade all these guys. Yeah. And because they were too good, those players were too proud. They were not going to lay down and lose. They were going to try to make the playoffs. And the only way that you can make your team miss the playoffs and finish dead last is to gut them. And that you see what's going on right now. What happened a few years ago with Buffalo and Arizona. You see what's going on with Arizona and Montreal right now. That is the formula. That is the
damage that does. Team. The damage that does, Mike, to players who are around losing situations for long periods of time is absolutely palpable. Like there's no way you can sit there and say, because you might not get that player, and there's a chance you will, but you might not get that player. And if you don't get that player, the players who are there, who are used to losing or get accustomed to losing, that is a huge problem. That is something that you cannot get. Like I always think that it's better to keep a team winning and have a winning environment than it is.
Then you don't get the player act.
Yeah, but you have a 25%, the best thing, in the best case scenario, you have a 25% chance of getting that player, but you have a 100% chance that losing all those games is going to screw up those players.
I mean, go ahead.
I've always struggled a little bit about whether I actually believe that. I've tried to think back about teams that had lost for a while and then got it together. And you're a losing team until you're a winning team. Is it culture, or is it just the right kind of guys came together?
Right now we
all talk about that. We talk about it as if it's there's a losing culture, but do the Oilers have a losing culture, or did management just not get the right players? Did they get unlucky with the draft? Like, I'm not sure we really know the answer to that. I tend to blame management more in Edmonton than they've got a losing culture. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
it is impossible to know. It's like one of those arguments you can never know for sure. Because the reality is, like, you still have a losing culture in Toronto. From all those years of trying to win and trying to win, they still haven't won a playoff series. So listen, and the reality is that those guys still have. And what happens is this: the Maple Leafs fall down dangerously to Montreal last year in the playoffs, and things start to get scary. And that's when all those players remember losing all those games. And to me, that's when it creeps into their head and they get psychologically messed up.
I think we have different definitions of losing.
I disagree with that, because if you look at the Leaf roster, there's one player from the tank year. One, Morgan Riley. Everybody else was either in the minors or drafted after. So that losing mentality is not prevalent with that team in terms of regular season success. It's prevalent because their team is not
trying to learn how to win
playoffs.
That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to learn how to win.
Sometimes it doesn't even have to be in the players. It can be in the fan base.
But they are struggling and going through those growing pains.
Yeah. I mean, don't you think learning how to win in the playoffs is different than a winning and losing culture? I do. I think that's two separate things.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs have a losing culture, but I do think they're trying to figure out how to win in the playoffs, because I do think once they get into the playoffs, their long history, and I mean long, that it gets talked about and it gets discussed. And they weren't there for all those. But if constantly people are reminding you,
it doesn't matter. And people
are
watching them play.
Start to squeeze the sticks a little bit, and you wonder, okay, well, I got to try to defeat this. But is that losing culture? No, I don't think so.
And I think their fan base is misrepresented. Their fan base has extremely high standards. They, there are some who are old enough to remember when they won the Stanley Cup in '67, but there were teams that made the conference final in '99, in '93, in '94, in 2002. That's not ancient history. That's not in black and white. They expect that. They expect a team that makes the most money or the second most money in the league to win. And when they don't, they're pissed off. And then when they don't win, they're ready to take it out on the people that they deem responsible. And that's management, and that's coaches, and that's players.
I agree with that.
But Toronto fans are a large collection of Russ Cohens who believe they know exactly what needs to be done. Every game, and not in like guessing what maybe they should do, but feeling like they have a real handle on it. And that's why I really like Toronto fans.
I'm going to tell Russ you said that, Kev.
If I could name this show, I would name it a large collection of Russ Cohens. A show without Russ Cohen.
Yeah. I mean, Russ is very passionate about his opinions, and I've described the difference. I've been a sports writer for 40 years, and I always worry that I'm going to be wrong. And Russ never even thinks the possibility.
Well, think about that, which is really funny about that.
The idea of pilot air.
What's really funny about
the next time in a press box,
we are a product of the teams we grew up watching. You know what I mean? And it's like, and the reality is, like, Russ is he's a reporter now, but he's a Rangers fan. He was a Rangers fan growing up. He was, and the Rangers are like that, right? That is a Ranger mentality. And what makes, when I get, like, we have Jan Levine, who's a great writer for us. He has the Ranger mentality. Like, when you have writers who are writing from that perspective of people who grew up with the team, it makes a huge difference, because Anthony's that way. Bill Meltzer's that way. It's like with the Flyers, it's like this, you guys have seen the Ilkas and Asalos of the world and things like that. You've seen this whole reality that's happened right throughout and that's why I'm a product of the Flyers culture as well, which is why I don't understand tanking, because I had an owner here who always went for it all the time. You know what I mean? What you do is you go for it, even if it means you're going to sacrifice your future. You go for it, and that doesn't always work.
And I'm a product of the Leaf organization, who for the span of 8 years was a team that barely missed the playoffs.
Yeah,
always tantalized, always and they weren't good enough to advance a round, but they were good enough just to screw themselves to draft in the middle of the first round, and drafted such great guys like Jeff Ware and Brandon Convery. And okay, you are not going to win a good goddamn unless you're drafting at the top of the draft, or unless you have a general manager like Steve Yzerman who will draft Vasilevskis at the end of the first round.
You see, that does happen, and you don't have to always draft at the top of the draft. And the reality, so my friend Simon, Simon Dingley, right, from CBC, right, great guy. Fantastic guy. I've been friends with him for a very long time now. He loves my one quote about Maple Leafs and Canadiens fans, which I always throw out there, is that Canadian fans blame everybody else for what's happening to them, and Leaf fans blame themselves for everything that's happening on themselves. Like, and this has always been the case. Like, it really is true. Like the difference between those two giant fan bases is Montreal is an excuse culture quite often, and I'm using that in the most, just because they think that their group is great and somebody else must be screwing it with you, where Toronto thinks that their group is messed up and that they need to get better players, need to change things around, new coaches, new players, new general managers, and they're completely different that way. And I think it's true. And fan bases are. And Mike, you grew up in the team that's very frustrating, like that hasn't won since '67.
Yeah, and pile on top of that I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, where
right, that plays into it too, right? You got the combination.
I think it's a plus for the Maple Leaf fans though, because I said this before, but when the Maple Leafs decided they were going to strip it down to the chassis, like Maple Leafs fans, they got it, they understood. Like they were totally on board, and the level of sophistication with the Maple Leaf fans is just so different. Like that's one of the reasons why, they immediately went to the dark side with regard to Muzzin, is because they know how that works. Like they understand concussion, they understand how that is. Now it's a little premature, but they're very sophisticated about how the NHL works. They get it. They know the salary cap. You don't. They understand tanking. I don't have to explain it to them. They get it. They know it's not players. That's the same is true in Montreal. So yeah, they're Toronto fans. When I worked at USA Today, I used to hear from them all the time.
This is crazy. You're working at the USA Today,
Yeah, but I certainly heard about them. So. From them.
No, and I listen, the passion that they have, it's part of why I'm in business, right? Like I get it completely.
Yeah, no, they're really unrivaled in the English speaking world. Because Montreal, there's a lot of French speaking who don't, you just don't hear from them. They go elsewhere. But
before they did the tanking, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, there were years, many, many years where they did not accept that, and they tried to fix it.
No. Because believe me, they called on when I was a caller to Toronto radio for years. They called me the mayor of Tank Nation because I was the one advocate. There are some, and there are fans like this in all fan bases. There are some Leaf fans who were content with the fact that if they won on Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada while they were sitting in their Barca lounge or drinking their 12-pack of Labatt's, that they were happy. They were satiated. But honestly, this team was never going to win the Stanley Cup doing that. So, for me, as a fan, I'm like, okay, they need to get bad. They need to get top players in the draft, and then they need to build around that, and then maybe they will win before most of their fan base shuffles off their mortal coil. I mean, that's the whole point of this whole thing, is to root for a team that wins, not for a team that's going to be 14th place in the NHL.
Yeah, in the great words of Brian Burke, there's only one parade every year, right?
Yeah,
and it's like that's and everybody's trying to win.
Yeah, well, and no matter what happens at the trade deadline, only one team's going to get it right.
Right, only one team's going to get it right, and everybody else is going to get it wrong, and everybody's going to take gambles that didn't pay off. And unless you win it all, it doesn't pay off, and that's. But I do want to talk about this is interesting because I do think we have perhaps I can't remember a time when we've had two better Canadian teams in Canada than we have with Toronto and Calgary. Right now, we have two teams that are absolutely. This is probably the best two Canadian teams in Canada we've had. We've had one good Canadian team at times, but can you remember two? This Calgary team is about to set another crazy record. That they're gonna, if they win their next game, they're going to be. Or no, I think they just said this, Randy. Correct me if I'm wrong. They were the first team to sweep a 7-game homestand, and this goes along with the fact earlier in the year they were the first team to sweep an 8-game road trip in history of the league. Right, so this is a crazy thing. This Calgary team is so interesting. And when you watch Gaudreau, and I watched last night, and I thought it was really interesting. And then on NHL later, I saw Brian Lawton talk about it. It was funny because I was kind of frustrated because exactly what I want to talk about the show is what he brought up about Gaudreau. Gaudreau has changed because he has been able to, for the first time in his career, have 2 gears. And Gaudreau always went at 1 gear, full speed all the time.
I thought you said 2 beers. I wonder where we were going.
Oh, 2 gears. 2 gears. 2 gears.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Gaudreau's size, I'm not sure he's ever had 2 beers, but but he has always gone full tilt, all out, absolutely full speed. Right. Last night on the Lindholm's goal, he comes across, he gets the puck pass to him. They're on a 3-on-2, and this is a situation where Gaudreau, in his best, would always try to beat somebody and make a play. He realizes that the play's not there, circles back to the blue line kind of and slows it down, waits for the trailer to pick up, hits it with a pass, and they score. And I'm like, that is an interest. That's Johnny Gaudreau matured. That's a mature Johnny Gaudreau.
Well, and maybe I'm overestimating this factor when it comes to Calgary because I saw Calgary play Toronto last week. And I really like the way this team is playing under Darryl Sutter. They're big, they're mean, they're physical, and now with Gaudreau and Lindholm and Tkachuk, and now they've added Toffoli, they have enough offense to win. And Markstrom is playing great in goal. You got two completely different built teams in Toronto and Calgary. One's all offense, the other one I think is more physical and more defense. And when you saw the two of them together, Calgary beat the crap out of the Leafs. Zadorov knocked Andre Kasha for a loop, and really I thought the Leafs played in a way with fear in their
I saw that too, Mike. I agree with that, and I think Calgary's a way better team than Toronto right now.
Right, and to your point about Gaudreau, do you think Gaudreau is playing the way he is because, and not the motivation of he's going to be a free agent? He's playing without fear because he knows he's protected. He knows he's got guys that are physical on that team that will back him up in case somebody tries to do something. Nobody's going to touch him because Zadorov will drop a bomb on that guy or Gabranson. Yeah,
right. And he also has a total emerging star playing with him in Lindholm, right? He's got this this Lindholm
to me, it's for a while now, Eck. I'm really on the Lindholm Selke. I think he's going to be I think he's in the final 3, and I think he's actually I think has a possibility of potentially taking the trophy this year. I think he's been that.
He's got a serious shot at it. And so remember how Lindholm gets to Calgary? Do you remember this story? How he gets to Calgary? How he ends up in Calgary? Because where was he before that?
He was part of the deal with Noah Hannafin.
With Hannafin, right? He comes from Carolina. He comes from Carolina because Peters, right? Wasn't it Peters who was in Carolina? Mm-hmm. Like Lindholm, and then ends up in Calgary and says, we got to get Lindholm up here.
Right. And
Bill Peters deserves a ton of credit for that, for picking him up in that trade. I mean, I remember the trade like it was yesterday, and that was a really a huge. We all saw him. Why is Lindholm? Lindholm, we thought he was a good player, but just to see where he is now, it's just that's.
Yeah, I don't know that I would refer to Gaudreau maturing and Lindholm developing. I mean, they're 27 and soon to be 28 and 29.
It's fair, but
they're in the primes of their careers and playing very well. Gaudreau, what has really shocked me is, the measurement of a quality player oftentimes is reflected in the even strength points. And Gaudreau's starting to pull away from people. He got, the last time I looked, 53 even strength points. Nobody's got more than 48, and most people are down in the 40s.
Right.
He is 5-on-5 is Goudreau time.
It is.
And he is really taking advantage of that. He's very dynamic, and a lot of top players have trouble getting points 5-on-5, but he hasn't. He's really been effective, and I'm taking the top 10 teams in the NHL and doing, 5 reasons why they could win the cup and 3 reasons why they can't. And starting with Calgary, and there are a lot more reasons why they could succeed than there are reasons why they could fail. I mean, fail. I mean, they basically are built to compete in the postseason, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And Sutter, I don't know if you guys got to see Sutter's press conference last night. They played it on the NHL Network. Was one of the funniest. Like, Sutter has so many moments that are funny, right? But they had, a reporter asked him, "What does it feel like to have like a cushion now between you and the next?"
Yeah, that was good. I saw that.
See this? And so he comes out and says, "You know what cushions are? Cushions are pillows, and they're made of feathers." He's like, "Doesn't feel very good. Feathers can be pointy if they poke through that cushion. Doesn't feel very good."
You start losing those feathers. So.
Right.
Back when he was coaching in LA and LA was good, the players considered Sutter press conferences must-see TV. They would gather around the television to watch Sutter do the press conference, and they would howl at each time, he would joust with and joust is too strong a word. But, a reporter knows that he's going to could be challenged. He asked a question. And they were very amused by Sutter when he would do that.
I've been in press conferences with him during the Stanley Cup Finals a couple times, and just like, and that is something. It is really, it's a little bit intimidating. It's a little bit like, where you're going to go with it. But it's always great. And how much the players just frigging adore him. And it's just like, because of the way, because this is part of it. Like, this is part of his personality. The just don't care thing, like, I don't care what the team tells me. I got to go talk to the media. So I'm going to talk to the media. I'm going to say whatever the hell I want to say. That's what the players want. The players want somebody to champion that for them. This is their world. They get it. And he's also just like the guy who's like reading, we've talked about before, like reading, what kind of tractor you should buy and stuff like that on the bus.
Yeah, he reads, farm implement man. It goes beyond the media. Like, there were plenty of stories of him just, not being thrilled to have corporate sponsors in his dressing room. Really kind of old school about it. And, in the early days, I think people saw that as well. He's never going to go far. But, when you're that successful, you get licensed to do things that maybe other coaches can't.
Right.
So, and, he doesn't mind. Like, I thought it was amazing what he said at a press conference about when someone asked him about a trade. Well, you ought to talk to Tree Living about that. I thought, if I'm Tree Living up there, I'm going,
yeah.
So.
But before we end the show, I wanted to see what everybody thought of the Nathan MacKinnon situation. He slashed at a linesman off of a face-off in a game against the Bruins, and the NHL basically said, well, we've reviewed this and we don't think it's worthy of any kind of discipline.
I agree with that. It's not worthy, I don't think either.
Well, I thought he was going to be suspended.
So did I. And again, and Kevin, where I'm going to go with this. This is the start.
It was what happened in this play when I looked at it is that he ties up with the guy in the face-off circle, right? And the other guy takes a couple little cheap shots at him and up high. And you can imagine MacKinnon is like, his face, when you get punched in the face, you're not immediately coherent of where everybody is around you. And he just swings the stick towards the direction of the guy who was jousting with. And the guy has already skated away by a step, and he hits the referee. That's what it looked like to me. I mean,
so his defense is, I wasn't meaning to swing my stick at you. I hit you accidentally.
Right. That's
I don't think that
already vacated the area. That's the only thing.
Not really. He's only like a step away.
It's still enough that it was. And listen, I think there's no discipline now, but between the Patrick hit, which I think was definitely dirty, and this. There may be sort of a quiet sort of, maybe nothing happens, but
yeah, I mean,
these things are going to start getting noticed.
It doesn't exonerate you,
right?
I don't think he intended to do that, but that doesn't exonerate you.
You're solitary having so much players.
A minute penalty for an accidental high stick, an accidental, when you swing your stick in a reckless manner. He swung his stick in a reckless manner, and he got the official. And that I thought he would get a couple of games.
You don't think intent plays into this at all?
It does play into it in terms of how much he's going to get.
Yeah.
But if you're reckless, if you recklessly drive your car and you accidentally run someone over,
right?
You're going to pay a price for that. If you're reckless in your actions in a bar.
It's called vehicular homicide. That's what.
Yeah, but we're talking. Well, getaway. Wait.
But no, in anything, if you do anything and you act recklessly, and someone is injured, you pay a price for that. You can get sued, and so it just carries over on the ice if you're reckless in the swing of the stick. Like I don't think that he should be, face a big penalty for this. But I thought he would get one. Now. Right. I'm not losing any sleep over it. I'm just saying I probably would have given him a suspension. So
I'll just, again, this is where I have the problem, Mac. If it was another Colorado Avalanche center, number 91, Nazem Kadri, he would have been suspended.
Yeah, for sure.
No, because I don't think the slash at the player. If he hits the player back with that slash after the players hit him a couple times with a couple dirty shots.
It's even worse that he slashed a linesman.
Yeah, but he doesn't. If he intentionally skates by and slashes a linesman, yes, of course, 100%. There's a difference. I mean, we're talking about guys would get sued and put in jail all the time for just fights. That we see in hockey all the time. Yeah, player versus player is allowed. That's a different rule set. That's a different thing.
I'm sure Tom Lysiak back in the 80s was said, I didn't mean to trip the linesman. I just happened to stick my stick in between his legs and can opener him. It's
Well, in basketball, we've seen several times when the guy just comes up and he comes to argue the call, and in his hurry to get there, what does he do? He bumps the referee. What happens? He's gone. He's ejected. Right. And he didn't need to do that.
Yeah, Kev,
that's directed at the referee. Again, he's angry at the referee. He's going towards the referee. This all's happening towards the referee. Then none of this was happening towards the referee in any way, shape, or form.
Kev, Juwan Howard didn't really mean to punch the Wisconsin.
Yeah, he should have gotten more than the rest of the season. I like Juwan Howard quite a bit.
Former St. Joe Hawks head coach.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I do see your point, Ak. I think we're, as Brendan Shanahan said to me one time, well, what did, when he gave a guy a fine, he said, well, what did you think you should have gotten? I said, well, I thought you should have got a game. He said, all right, so we're arguing the difference between a fine versus one game. Now, he said, there's a lot of gray here. So you and I you say he doesn't get one. I think he maybe should have got a game or two. It's just in the eye of the beholder. It's not the end of the world. So
yeah, but part of this, if Kadri does it, Kadri's got a career of doing stupid things. MacKinnon doesn't. MacKinnon doesn't have a career of doing stupid things. MacKinnon's been a good soldier. MacKinnon hasn't taken shots at referees in the past. I mean, we're not talking about anything. We're talking about MacKinnon trying. He's a star player who got disoriented because he was slashed up high.
But as Anthony just said, I mean, with the Nolan Patrick hit, that was a borderline situation where, I think some players would have been suspended for that, but because it's Nathan MacKinnon and he's a star player, I think they gave him the benefit of the doubt, just like they've given Ovechkin the benefit of the doubt many a time. And he's one of the dirtiest players in this league.
Ovechkin's a dirtier player than Nathan MacKinnon.
Yeah, historically, though, the NHL has protected their officials, regardless of, they don't want to hear, well, I didn't mean to. And, they say, you got to be careful around referees, and you got to be mindful of where they are, that kind of thing.
Did MacKinnon apologize to the guy? Do we know anything about that? Like on the ice, like as the play was going on?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, my guess is they went to the NHL went to the official, and the official said, no, it wasn't directed at me. It just hit me.
You think they did that? I mean,
why wouldn't they? Because that plays into the intent. Like if MacKinnon had been fighting with that linesman, like right before the drop or whatever, drop the puck.
That was early last night. That was
that's fair. That's fair. Maybe they did. Maybe they called him and he said, "Yeah, don't worry about it."
It feels like that would be a call you'd have to make in that situation, because otherwise, you'd have to know if there was intent. There's no intent.
Yeah, I err on the side of protecting officials. You got to protect your stick around them. That's a kind of a standard thing now in the NHL. You're responsible for your stick.
That's true. That's a great point.
Yeah, MacKinnon acted irresponsibly.
When you call a high stick, even if you're on a follow through or whatever, something that you didn't mean to do, you're responsible for your stuff. But that's player on player, player against referee.
Well, player on referee is worse, though. I mean, that's
player on referee is
historically.
No, it's worse if it's intended to hurt the referee.
No,
referees get hit with pucks all the time, and we don't sit there and say the player tried to
hitting with a puck is a lot different.
I mean, I've seen players take shots, you've seen it too, like at the end of a play where a player taking off an icing or whatever, and it touches the icing and then just fires it around the boards really hard. Hitting a referee. I've seen that happen where I'm like, there's some intent. He meant to hit him for something. That's something that felt like that. But this didn't. I don't know. Maybe it's all opinion. I mean,
like I said, it's not like we're arguing the difference between 0 and 10.
No, yeah. I'd like to think that they talked to the referee and got the intention there.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then I guess I'd respect that decision more.
Yeah, or MacKinnon said something to the referee afterwards too and said, "Oh man, sorry about that. I didn't thought he was there." Anyway,
I thought I was trying to kill the player, not
I was just trying to kill the player, which is wrong. It's still not.
Not as wrong. That's right.
not
as wrong. That's right.
Not suspension worthy when two guys are slashing at each other. To me, that's a different situation.
That's hockey, folks.
That's hockey, right? There you go. Well, remember, without the buzz, folks, it is just hockey. Whether you're slashing at the referee or slashing at your mom, whatever it is, it's hockey. And we will talk to you all again tomorrow.